Welcome to Pulpcast, the official podcast of thepulpmedia.com. In this podcast, we discuss everything in pulp culture, from comic books to movies and video games. This week, we bring you an interview with Rick Remender, writer of Deadly Class, Black Science, Low, and Tokyo Ghost at Image. Okay, so we're going to focus on Tokyo Ghost. So what is your pitch? What's your elevator pitch for someone who's new to this series?
The series takes place in the future where we get to put our eyes on all of the natural catastrophes that we fear are inevitably coming towards us. But more than that, it was an exploration of looking at the exponential addictions we all have to our technology. And it's a seen through the relationship of two characters. One who is completely withdrawn and addicted to his technology, watching 20 different shows at all times and checking, 1,000 different social media feeds, and his girlfriend who is straight edge and has no technology and still loves the man that he was and has almost developed a very codependent relationship where she navigates him and keeps him on operational while he's basically a brain dead. Lost inside the internet. And they function as basically the police in Los Angeles. They're called constables. And they end up sort of falling into a mission to go to the last tech-free area on Earth, which is the Garden Nation of Tokyo. And that allows them both to be tech-free and an examination sort of what happens to their relationship as well as some of the consequences of what they've done up until that point.
Awesome. So one of the big things that you touch on, it is sci-fi, but what you focus on is kind of this tech addiction. So as you prepared or as you developed this, how much did you take from personal or things that you've seen, and how much do you take from things that you've read or kind of studies that you've looked into?
It's a lot of both. I think Ray Kurzweil's the most sort of informative in terms of what's going to happen with the singularity and the things he predicts that'll happen as we inch towards the singularity. And obviously looking at my own, the change of my brain, there was something that one of my favorite bands, De La Soul, tweeted out not too long ago that just showed a computer monitor with a gun next to it, and it just said, "I miss my pre-internet brain." And it really gave me a chuckle because that was a lot of what I was experiencing when I was writing this. For somebody who was born in the mid-'70s, I am the last generation to have spent the first 20 years of my life without the internet, without all this connectivity and all of this information to process every day. And I can see a real difference in my attention span, my emotional state. And I found it really fascinating to dig into this stuff because ultimately it's just going to become exponentially more and more a part of being a human. I find that when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I do is grab my phone and check things. I'm never free of connection. When I read books now, I'll get a chapter in and my brain will start screaming at me to go check my email or to see what's on Twitter. I got off every other aspect of the internet a couple of years ago when I was first starting to write this because I had really discovered that I read an article that says that you get the same endorphin kick that you get when you play a slot machine as when you go to check your phone. And it's an inherent part of your brain that's trying to it's there basically as a defense mechanism to alert you should something be coming to the cave and you hear a sound outside. And it's an endorphin kick that then also is correlated with the addiction to gambling. But they find that these same things are activated when we check our phones because we're expecting something inside, these alerts from Facebook or Tumblr or Twitter or Wambler or Snapscap or whatever bullshit we're dialing ourselves into. We're not taking in substantive information as much anymore. We're taking in trivia and nonsense about what people had for lunch. And it causes, there's been studies about how it can cause social awkwardness as you weren't invited to hang out with some people, but you saw them Instagram that they went someplace. It just has all of these really interesting ramifications that I wanted to examine as sort of the backdrop of a larger, bigger kind of Judge Dredd style story in a post-apocalyptic nightmare world.
And so you talk a lot about social media and kind of how that is a hook that is really hard to get rid of. But in the first issue, you do some interesting things kind of with video games. Are you going to delve more into that? Because that was like when I was growing up, that was a really big thing of kids and stuff being addicted to video games and that triggering all kinds of like autism and that kind of stuff. Is that going to be brought back up?
That becomes a really huge part of the story around issues 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. It's a very, very big part of it, and we get to look at that through the eyes of a character, Davy Trauma, who I introduced in the first issue, who popped back up in the 5th issue, and he plays a major role in the second arc in the closeout. And he is a cautionary tale and sort of a Roald Dahl, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, bad Mikey TV style kid. But he is obviously addicted to video games to the point where cyberspace is real, and this world is a boring playground where he pops in every once in a while to do what's necessary. So Davy's story plays a major role as we take a look at how the excitement and the entertainment value of video games can not only shorten your attention span, but become incredibly addictive. And to all of us, I still get addicted to 2 games a year when I should be reading great novels that I haven't read. I'm running around in Grand Theft Auto, puzzling out a difficult level, or playing Rayman with my son, or getting trapped in Destiny, leveling up a character to get the right power gun. They're very addictive and it's very entertaining, but ultimately it's not very substantive in what it's adding to any of our brains.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're going to include that, because when I started reading it, it makes sense with what you're saying before of how when you check your phone you get this rush. And I've heard studies of where developers will hire psychologists to help their developers program like how often you get loot drops, and like even the sounds and even the colors used in video games to keep you coming back to get that kind of stuff.
Well, you think about the games like Clash of Castles, or South Park recently did a thing making fun of this or commenting on the addictive qualities of these games. They are these in-game purchases. They really do reward a part of the brain that feeds into the same thing that causes addiction, and it causes people to start spending all kinds of money to get those same Pavlovian response little biscuits, and as we become more and more immersed in our technology, it just was interesting to me more than anything to take a look at what happens to our relationships. Really was at the core of it, where you see so much throughout history, alcoholism and drug abuse tearing apart families, and one of this a spouse becoming codependent and holding the family together. It was very interesting to me to see to play around with the idea of what happens when a technological addiction becomes is taken to the next step, and how a codependent would then be formed in that relationship.
You were talking about codependency, and so that is another really important element of this book, how it's a romance between these two, but it's an examination of how addictions can be destructive in that kind of environment. And so it's Debbie longing for the man that Teddy used to be before all this happened. So how would you describe Ted as a character and what his whole motivation is as part of the cast of Tokyo Ghost?
His background is he was sort of a normal kid in this world, meaning he was, fed garbage food and constantly jacked into 15 cartoons and not really present in reality. And Debbie, who was his next door neighbor, she was sort of adamant that she wasn't going to become like her parents. She found Teddy as a boy, and she unplugged him and forced him to go out and play with her. And he was sort of saved by her, and they became very close. And as the only two kids who weren't dialed in and teched out, and addicted to fame and all of the things that the short-term gratification of it all, they became best friends. And then as they grew older, they fell in love. And they had a secret garden where they would go play, and it's a very traditional love story with the two of them. But Teddy ultimately falls victim over and over again to the violence of this world in the Isles of Los Angeles, and eventually he just can't stand being weak anymore, and so he puts himself up to become a constable, which is a program where they fill you full of nanotech, and you get all of the steroids and muscles and super enhancements to make you into a Superman. But in doing so, he has compromised so much of himself that he ends up falling deeply, deeply into the distraction of the internet while he does his job as a constable. And Debbie holds on to him and stays with him in this world, basically because of who he was and that she loves him. But more than that, he's the only friend and person she's ever had. And so she doesn't know what to do or how to let go, which is a very the more I read about codependency in these relationships, it's a staple. A lot of the time in a marriage, be it the husband or the wife, they feel that there are no other options, and that this is the only person that they know or understand, and they can't see their way to leave. And so Debbie is a strong personality who went against the grain and swam upstream in terms of being her own person and not allowing herself to fall into the norms of the day and being distracted and living a cyber life to keep herself sort of distracted from the environmental catastrophe all around her, which is something that I wanted to examine because I see that as an aspect of what we do now. More people will get online and argue and scream about if Ant-Man's helmet was handled correctly in the new movie. Then you see people concerned about the Arctic sheet, that's melting right above us that will lead to the end of our species. It's like we have infanticized ourselves, and we are all focused on these things that we loved when we were children in order to not look at some of the militarization of our police force or any of the various ugliness that's happening all around us. And so Debbie is somebody who didn't fall victim to that. She looks at the ugliness square in the eyes, but she's ultimately still a human. And so when the person she loves also falls into it, she holds on to him and ends up sort of trapped in that situation.
And their history is really tragic. I mean, as tragic as their current state is, I mean, not like the end of issue 5, but let's say like the start of issue 1, kind of that status, I guess, that they shared there. But when you delve into their backstory of how they met one another and with her mom and stuff, it's just as tragic back then as it is now.
Yeah, and hopefully it reflects a little bit on what we're seeing now. I know that as a parent, there'll be days when I'm really exhausted from working all week and I'm just tired in general. And I will sit down and screw around on the iPad, looking at nothing and filling my head full of garbage that my brain's still going to have to spend the same amount of energy to process, while I'll put my kids in front of a video game for a couple hours to buy myself, a little respite. And so it was just and you'll do it, you'll go out to eat with the kids and they're acting crazy and bouncing off the walls as kids are wont to do. And you'll end up giving them your cell phone and, play Angry Birds just to buy you some peace. And so I wanted to sort of take that and exponentially magnify it a little bit so that there was, we can see maybe not a logical conclusion, but a potential conclusion in terms of what that leads to.
And so issue 5 had some craziness in it, and to avoid spoilers on that, but let's say there was a shift in the status quo.
Yeah.
So to tease, or maybe to, kind of give a little bit of a feel for what's coming, what is the future for these two characters?
Well, Teddy, after fighting with his addiction and eventually losing that battle, as many do in a moment of crisis, Teddy returned to the technology that he uses for strength and protection to save himself, and reverted back into the constable-led Dent, the mindless, manipulatable beast. And I guess, make sure you preamble all this with spoiler, I suppose. And so leading into the second arc, we are going to see some of the ramifications to Teddy, and he becomes the focal character for a little while as we see now that he's basically lost this perfect dream, this utopia, how he responds to that once he's back in Los Angeles.
How has it been working with Sean Murphy on this story?
I love Sean. I think that he is, obviously one of the very best comic artists probably in the history of the medium, and he's also a professional who gets his work turned in on time. He's a wonderful collaborator. We talk on the phone a lot and became pretty good friends over the course of this. He's that rare breed of super talent that's also a professional, and I think that the series, once it's all collected in one big hardcover and we can see it all together with all those beautiful Matt Hollingsworth colors, I think it'll stand as one of the things I'm most proud of because of that collaboration. I find that the collaboration and the joy that is struck up from the energy of the conversations and the excitement that is born of collaborating and truly collaborating and cooking things up together and volleying ideas and talking on the phone about designs and how the world looks. It fully invests both writer and artist in this thing that we co-created and we co-own. And those are the products, the end results are normally the ones that I'm, the very most proud of.
That's awesome. And I don't remember if it was him or if it was you, but somebody on Twitter mentioned that sales increased from issue 1 to issue 2 and how rare that is.
Well, they didn't increase, but there was very little fall off. Normally between issue 1 and 2, you see a 60 to 70% fall off. A lot of people will buy a first issue as a collectible. A lot of people will buy it trying out a new series. It's just a standard industry thing where you can expect that huge drop off. And I think we only saw 20% on drop off between 1 and 2. It was very, very, very minimal. The book's numbers held very close. I think at this point, including the reorders, we're selling about 28,000 copies an issue, and we opened up at 39. So you're looking at something that bucks the trend of the normal attrition that we see in numbers. And it's a nice feeling. It's nice, people have responded well to the book, and I think that when they see where we're taking things towards the conclusion at issue 10, it's something we've been planning for a long time, and hopefully it'll be satisfying.
And so, I guess sales would be the ultimate identifier of positive reception, but if you've read reviews or other things, have people generally been very excited and accepting of this story?
I'm not sure. I occasionally I try to read my replies on Twitter once in a while, even though some people think that that's an avenue to attack. So I normally I check it, a couple few times a week, and try to respond to people if I have the time who are inquisitive or just saying things. A lot of the response to the book that I've seen on at least Twitter and Instagram have been people who are very positive. I usually gauge it by the people who take the time to write in thoughtful letters, and we've had no shortage of those. People who really identified with the loss of attention span that they've suffered since the invention, especially of the iPhone, and fear of what happens to a developing brain when the short attention span is all it's ever known. And I think that the overwhelming response from fans doing like fan art and things like that is a good gauge. I don't tend to find a whole lot of value in checking the reviews. There are some of the things I'm very most proud of and that have kind of stood the test of time in my career were sometimes poorly reviewed or not reviewed or outright ignored or had poor sales figures, like Fear Agent. So I've sort of trained myself to understand that, once I do my due diligence to work really hard with the artist and my editor to put together the kind of story we want to tell and to make sure I workshop it enough that it's fully developed and the best possible story I can tell, I just go forward and tell it and do it the way I want, especially, or in creator-owned books where I'm allowed to do that. And if I'm happy with the end result, that really is how I try to gauge it. When an issue of Deadly Class comes in, or Black Science, or Low, or Tokyo Ghost, I really do know if I achieved what I was out to achieve, or if I didn't. And if I didn't, I try to analyze and keep my eyes open for where I might have failed. But I don't find that craft-wise, I've been doing this since 1997 now. I don't find that the average review really helps me, whether it be pro or con, into dissecting that. I turn to editors, I turn to screenwriter friends, other writers. I turn to other people who have experience with the craft to help me hopefully find the holes in my writing and to continue to get better.
I think that's a very fair response. There was a lot of fan art right after issue 1.
That's always a great sign, that Sean's developed a design there that people love. We had a ton of fan art, and nothing makes me feel better, because I did a lot of fan art when I was a comic reader. I used to, if I really fell in love with something, I would sit around drawing it and sending in, or just drawing it for the fun of it. And I don't think that it's such a wonderful feeling when people do that for something that I've had a hand in creating.
And then there's that amazing piece that Bengal did, I'm certain, right? Where he kind of combined all of your different stories into one piece?
Yeah. We did those as prints for the Thought Bubble show in Leeds. And that was, Bengal's always been somebody who I've been a huge fan of. Was exposed to his work probably going back 8-9 years now from a friend of mine who I shared a studio with when I lived in Portland. And he's a genius. So yeah, it was masturbatory on some level, but it was pretty cool to get to see all the characters kind of cobbled together in a piece by somebody so talented.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. My next question deals with you working with your editor Sebastian Gerner. How is it with him where, he's not necessarily, or maybe he is, I don't know, but he's not necessarily presenting like artistic representations of what you're writing? I assume it's more kind of writing back and forth.
The way I prefer to work, and the reason that a lot of people who do creator-owned books don't hire an editor. I want to have an editor because I want somebody to give me a counterpoint or vet my ideas or to scrutinize what I've come up with for holes. I want to make sure that the books are not just good. I want to make sure that every book I do is better than the last book. And I don't give a shit about, in terms of publicity or cult of personality, that doesn't mean anything to me. It's fleeting. I give a shit about leaving behind, big collections of comic books that are as good as I am humanly capable of making with the dopest artists on the planet. And having an editor means that all of those efforts are aided because there's somebody who is outside of the initial intention process. He'll help me see holes in my outlines and see holes in my motivation. And so the way that works is normally I cook my stuff up. I'll call him up. I'll talk to him about it. Sometimes he has notes. Sometimes he doesn't. I will revise a little bit. I'll script it. He will then take my script and add notes to the script. And I sort of then vet those notes. Sometimes I'll agree with him and I'll go back and rewrite. Tokyo Ghost 9, I just rewrote the entire opening based on some of his notes. And other times I'll be, comfortable with what I had. But ultimately it's, having an editor enables me to, I think, make a better product. with another set of eyes, kind of going over what I'm doing before I commit it to going to the artist.
I think that's really important that your creative process bounces around and it's not just like, okay, I think this is an awesome thing. Because sometimes, we don't catch the holes in our product, like you said. And so I think it's interesting because I do notice in all the image books that I read, there's very few that actually have editors. And I've always kind of wondered why they choose not to when, you make a great argument for it. So
everybody's got a different process.
Right.
And sometimes people are just exhausted from having editorial interference after working at Marvel or DC, and they just want to be left alone.
That's fair.
And I get that. I think for me, I don't ever want to be so self-assured that I just I think for me, more than anything, it's about the amount of time the artist is going to put in. I want to make sure that what they're drawing is the best it can be. And to me, that's going to be better when there's a paid member of the team invested in poking holes in the writing and helping me make sure that I haven't missed, like you said, missed a beat or missed a hole or potentially gone down a trail that leads to nowhere, which even the best of us can do. And I also then get a perspective of somebody who's reading it for the first time when I turned in a script, and he can sort of react to it and give me, feedback. And sometimes his reaction, will show me a large hole in the story and a mistake. And other times we'll disagree, and then I just have to kind of go with my gut. But ultimately, I think that it enriches the stories. And he also, I think that the difference between my line of books and a lot of line of creator-owned books is that we ship them on time. We're running a model where we ship five issues and then take a couple of months off to put the trade out and catch back up, and then we do another 5 issues. And Sebastian helps keep those trains moving as well. And so we've been able to keep our books on a real steady schedule with the same artists, no fill-in artists. And, Deadly Class is on issue 20. Black Science, we're on 21. Low, we're on 13. Tokyo Ghost, Sean's already drawn up to issue 7. So we're working well ahead. And I think that Sebastian, helps keep us honest with that stuff.
That's awesome. I imagine that's really rare in the industry to be that functioning, that well-oiled machine.
I think that it's knowing your limitations. And I know that I'm writing so much and I want to have my mind clear for the writing, that having to also hound people to stay on schedules or build schedules or deal with Image on when trades are due and deal with Jeff Powell, our collections designer. Sebastian runs all that stuff, and so it enables me to have a few extra hours a week that I'm just focused on writing.
Awesome. So you're attending Image Expo this year.
Yeah.
And I assume that that's going to mean the announcement of new series. So I'm not going to ask for specifics on what's coming, but more, how do you feel about that? Because, you announced a couple months ago that you're moving strictly to creator-owned. So how does it feel to be in this position where, okay, now, you've had a good batch of stuff that's selling really well at Image and it's really popular. How excited are you to give us more?
I'm pretty excited. I'd say I found a contentment and a happiness. I got into comics in 1997 to emulate my heroes like David Lapham doing Stray Bullets, or Evan Dorkin doing, Hectic Planner, Milk and Cheese, or the, Hernandez Brothers, or Klaus, or, Jamie Hewlett's Tank Girl, or to do something like Garth Ennis's Preacher. I grew up reading Marvel comics, and so it was a real treat and a privilege to be able to write characters that I grew up with, like Wolverine and Psylocke, and to do crazy things to the Punisher and write Captain America. But ultimately, I see that as it's not moving me forward in terms of my creative process. It's trying to squeeze blood out of other people's characters. And I loved doing it, and it was a real blast, and I think my writing improved doing it. But for now, at least, I'm finding the purity of intention in creating my own books with artists and putting them out through Image is what I needed to do, because it's like I said, again, the simplest terminology is the purity of intention. I cook up an idea. My artists and I talk. Sebastian and I talk. We all get excited, and then we get to work on it. And we are our own generators. We don't have anybody cracking whips on us in terms of a larger boss. If we don't get our work done, Image just won't put it out. And if we don't put it out, the retailers will lose confidence and they'll stop ordering it. And the fans will get bored because of the huge gaps between issues, and they'll move on to another title. So it's really up to us to self-generate these comic books, to focus on the important thing, which is the craft of making, the best comics we can, and to keep them shipping on a regular schedule. And I find that having my hands in all the pots and it being, these are projects that I co-own with my artists, so it's our thing. Enables me to get an excitement for the work again that was beginning to wean a little bit when I was just doing exclusively the Marvel stuff. And as for the new stuff coming up, I've got with the addition of Devolution, which is a 5-issue miniseries I wrote in 2006. When that's done, I've got a schedule worked out where I'll have 3 or 4 books moving forward at all times. And keep, that's a nice balanced number that I can accomplish and still do my best work. So the other projects I have coming up, we're going to, they'll be staggered and spread out so that they're not all bundled all at once. But they are all with, some of the very, very best artists in the world, and, books that are ours that we're really passionate and excited to create and try and make something unique and put it out into the world.
That's awesome. I'm super excited. I'm hoping to be there. We'll see if it all works out. But even still, I'll look forward to the announcements online and see what else you got coming up.
Yeah, the Image Expos are a lot of fun, and the energy is always really positive. And it's an exciting time in comic books. I think that we're seeing a tremendous amount of public interest in the Marvel properties, and that's driving in new readers. I think that we're seeing people who are big fans of things like The Walking Dead or even Game of Thrones finding their way to comic books. And fingers crossed we can continue to make good comics that make them want to read more, so that those people will stick around and fall in love with the medium. And that's the goal.
Let's end with some fun questions.
Okay. Fun.
Who is your favorite Ninja Turtle?
Leo, yeah.
Any reasoning behind that? Defend your answer.
Well, for me, I'm of an age where I didn't watch the cartoons. I read the first 10 issues of the Black and White series and some of the one-shots, and that was it. And that was my whole total understanding of the Turtles. And Leo at the time was the no nonsense one. I was, what would I have been? So I bought that I probably started reading that in 1986. So I'm 12 years old, or I'm 13 years old, and so Leo was sort of like the Wolverine of the group. And as a huge X-Men nut, the disgruntled member was always the one that I found a little more intriguing. Of course, that trope has been sort of stomped into the ground. But yeah, back then I redrew an entire Leonardo one shot. I still have those pages. I redrew it page for page because I loved it so much. It was a very Frank Miller-esque kind of silent issue where they were fighting through New York. But yeah, he was the one who always seemed to get, I guess, a bit more severe.
Awesome.
Well, I appreciate the support. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me.
All right. Yeah, you're welcome. Have a great day.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
You have been listening to Pulpcast, the official podcast of thepulpmedia.com. You can email questions that we'll answer in future episodes to thepulpmediaus@gmail.com. Also, please check out our website, thepulpmedia.com, for reviews, articles, and more.